So, good morning, Donna. I want to introduce everybody to Donna Kennett. She's a funeral arranger at Shires Funeral Directors, who are part of CPJ Field. So, morning, Donna. Lovely to see you today.
Good morning.
Now, death and funerals is something that a lot of people find quite difficult to talk about. It's a very emotive subject. So, how did you get into the business? Because I think you've been doing this for about 8 years now. So what made you decide this is what you wanted to do?
I think really a bit of a sort of like a backstory. So quite a few years ago, I used to work for the local district council. And while I was in the office there, a gentleman came in and he was a neighbour. He lived in my village and he was talking about how, he's lonely and that sort of thing. And I said he could always pop down for a cup of tea. And then it just progressed. So I started shopping for him, used to go and collect his prescriptions, took him to the hospital one time. And then, fast forward a couple of years, he went into hospital for an operation and he died. And I was just, I was quite, obviously in shock that he had died. But it was really sort of like hard on my children because that was sort of like a generation that they've now lost. He was absolutely fantastic with them, told them some real sort of like gems of stories. And I went in to see him at the Chapel of Rest. It just felt natural. I just, I spoke to his children and they allowed me to go and see him. And I remember going into the chapel and he always wore a hat. Wherever it was, whatever season, whether it was a straw hat, whether it was a big winter hat, he always wore a hat. And I thought his hat wasn't, when I saw him in the coffin, his hat wasn't there. His mouth looked funny because his teeth weren't in, didn't have his stick. And it was just, I don't know, it stuck with me. Yeah, it stuck with me. And then a few years later, this position came up. I was looking for another job. And I thought, well, it's really customer service. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And I thought, well, if I can go and see Tom, then I could do that. Yeah, not a problem. So yeah, I started 8 years ago in June when CPJ Field took over Shires, as it's now known, and started it as a funeral arranger in Baldock. And then a couple of years later, I became community champion for Shires.
Yeah, so what does that mean? What's a community champion?
So it's just really trying to involve the business within the community. We do a lot of networking, hence why I'm with Ribbon, and that helps tackle the taboo. Talking about death, it's not going to bring death on by talking about it. It helps families if you talk about it, if you write down what you want, and just tackling the taboo surrounding death. We've got a Facebook group, and we've also, through sort of the lockdown, we started Letters of Kindness.
What's that then?
So that's where we ask in the local community to send letters, helping children to draw pictures and send them into the local care homes. Because a lot of residents were locked down, couldn't have visitors going in. It was just, the residents and staff. And it's just sending something in just to sort of cheer them up, and almost like a pen pal sort of thing. So they would send a stamped addressed envelope. So on our Facebook page, we have got a group linking that as well. So you can sort of see what the care home that we're sending the letters to that week.
That's really lovely. So I know, for example, with your branch in Baldock, you've got a shop window, and quite often you give that shop window to a local charity to promote what they do. Is that something is that continued? Is that been happening recently as well?
So through lockdown, I've been over at our Luton branch. So when the lockdown first started, because we were due to help out a local homeless charity, but obviously it just meant that they would have to drop off the items, which we do invite them to do. They can either drop off and we'll dress the window for them, or perhaps they've got a specific setup that they'd like to use, so they would come in and dress the window. But unfortunately, just because of lockdown, me being over here, I've not been able to do that, but that will restart again. But yeah, we offer the window, and not just our window at Baldock. All the funeral homes use their windows for a display for charity. So whether it's a local charity, local to them, or a national charity. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were currently in the Luton branch. What other branches have you got locally? I know there's one in Bedford because I drive past it when I go to Park Run.
So we've got Baldock and Letchworth. There's Luton, Dunstable, and Bedford and Sandy.
Oh, of course. How can I miss Sandy? That's where I live. I can't believe that. I know exactly where it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously with regards to lockdown, you know, that's been a really difficult situation, not only because of the increased rate of deaths, but the fact that initially, you know, people being able to go to a funeral was very limited down to, you know, immediate family, and obviously that's opened up a little bit more, but that must have been really difficult for all the families involved that you've had to deal with.
I don't think we'll ever understand on how that is going to affect them. Possibly, you know, in years to come, there will be issues surrounding that. But I think that as a funeral arranger, that was really hard to deal with, because we're used to not saying no. You know, so if somebody has an idea, and we'll try and give them lots of ideas of the elements that can be included within a funeral, we would give them those ideas. And if they say, well, what about this? If I can get it, they can have it. And I think it's just been really difficult watching families, especially at the start of lockdown, watching families have plans for, you know, perhaps a church service followed by, you know, the burial, going to just a graveside service with immediate family. It has been really, really, really difficult for them and for us, because, you know, we've not been able to give them what they want, what they envisage to give the send-off to their loved ones. But
I'm
it's
guessing
just...
that sorry, Donna, people are, I'm guessing, have adapted as well, you know, so maybe it's been more intimate than that they'd envisaged. So it's not all bad, but...
No, it has been, you know, it has been really difficult. We've had a family that was shielding, but because of their religion, they like to see their loved one in the chapel, which would normally have been, you know, all the prayers and everything within the chapel, but it just wasn't meant to be. So I was added to their WhatsApp group. They set up a WhatsApp group, and I used my mobile phone for a chapel visit so they could see their loved one, which was really, you know, quite emotional, because you're standing there silent and, you know, they're really upset, and I had to really try and hold, you know, my emotions in, because you know, it's you have to remain professional, but it still pulls at the heartstrings. It's really,
absolutely.
yeah, it has been hard.
I can't imagine, you know, it must take a certain type of person to do what you guys do, because you're dealing with other people's grief, and no, I know you don't get hardened to it, but obviously the more you deal with this, the more I'm guessing it's easier to cope with. But like you say, there are certain things that will probably just trigger something off one particular day. And I'm sure you must go home and take it out on your other half, or the pets or something.
You know, at the end of the day, we are human. You know, I will be the first to admit I have cried. You know, there have been weeks where it has taken its toll, and I have really sort of like the emotion of it all, especially at the height of the pandemic. You know, it has been really hard, and it's, you know, I try and look after their loved ones as though it's my loved one. So you do invest in so much within that funeral. You know, you look after that family so much for, you know, a short space of time. But there's so much for you to do and become involved in, and you become involved in their lives, obviously. So you want to make sure that even whether there is a pandemic or not, what they want, they get within reason. Yeah.
Well, following on from that then, so what, I'm putting you on the spot here, what is the most unusual thing that you've had to organise for a funeral?
Gosh, Louise.
Sorry. Didn't rehearse that one, did we?
No, we didn't have that one. You've really stumped me.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You're going to think of something afterwards.
I
And
know,
you know what?
afterwards when you stop recording, I was like, oh, Louise, add this bit in. No, I think, I don't know, doves. We've had doves, horses. We had a London bus. We've had a Land Rover hearse.
Wow.
You know, so
all sorts of things.
Yeah, different things. But like I say, I've always gone into an arrangement that if they have a little idea, and if I can get it, they can have it.
You will.
Yeah, you will.
So I know you obviously arrange funerals, and there are funeral plans, which seems a bit weird, somebody planning for their funeral. But obviously the costs of a funeral, you know, like anything, you do have to pay for these things, and it's not particularly cheap, but you can plan, so almost like an insurance policy to, you know, make sure that you're covered when you die. So you have those as well, don't you?
Yeah, so we have funeral plans, Plan with Grace, and we tend to find that when families come in and arrange the funeral of perhaps their elderly parents, they then think for themselves that they don't want to put their children through what they're going through. A funeral plan helps take away a lot of decisions from a grieving relative. So even down to whether it's a burial or a cremation, because we just, as a nation, we don't talk about death. So some families don't know what their parents want. Do they want to be buried, or do they want to be cremated? If they want to be cremated, what do you want to do with the ashes? Do you want them scattered somewhere, you know, beautiful, or do you want to go in the local cemetery? You know, and I think having a funeral plan, yes, it helps with cost, because a funeral cost is broken down between our charges as a funeral director and the charges of what we call disbursements. So therefore, say for instance, the church, the crematorium, the officiant, all of those sort of like third party fees. So our charges would be guaranteed. So if you took it out today, today's prices are guaranteed, even if, you know, the services aren't needed for another 15, 20 years.
Okay.
So that's sort of like, that's guaranteed. Obviously we can't guarantee third party fees, because some of them, especially perhaps a local council run crematorium, they put their fees up every year. So, you know, we can't guarantee that. And it would just mean that there's a small shortfall for the families to pay at the time of need. But it's a fantastic way, even if you don't pay for a plan, you know, we've got some details on our website that you can then have a look and think about what you'd like within your funeral. So, you know, like I say, burial or cremation, what do you want to do with the ashes?
Yeah, I know we've done that within our Wibbon setting, haven't we? You've come along to the group and brought some brochures with you, and you can actually write down and think, well, actually, I hadn't really thought about that. And there's quite a lot to think about when you come down to it.
There is. And if you're doing a plan, it just takes away those decisions at the time of grief, you know. So it does make life easier.
Yeah, I think the other thing I really liked was one of the times you came along and you talked about myths. I'm not going to put you on the spot again, because you might not remember what they are, but I remember, and I'll fudge this one because I'm not really sure the exact, but there was something about covering up clocks, was it, or was it covering up mirrors?
Yeah,
I can't remember now.
Stopping the time. So years ago they used to stop the clock, so that, because in rural areas, you know, you didn't have a local doctor, because obviously a doctor would have to go out and certify the death, verify that. So they would stop the clock. So when the doctor came in, and it could be you know, a couple of hours later, they could say to the family, when did you die? And they go, look at the clock and it's, you know, 12 o'clock or whatever. So
really interesting facts. I found those really good. You did quite a few from what I remember. But like you say, things have moved on, so obviously, you know, a lot of those don't happen anymore, but some still do. You know, there are some customs that still happen nowadays.
Yeah, like opening the window. You know, they open the window. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Oh, well, you know what? We've run out of time, but it's so interesting. The topic is obviously very emotive, especially at the moment. But where is the best place to get hold of you or any of the? Clearly, it's the website. And what is that? So
that's cpjfield.co.uk. On their website, you can find the location of each branch. And we have got over 37 funeral homes. So
wow.
Even sort of like, you know, Beds, Herts, Bucks, London, and then down the south. So, you know, it's not just Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. We are part of that group. So,
and you've got an active Facebook page as well, I know.
We have, and within the Facebook page there is the Letters of Kindness Facebook group, so people can ask to join, and it's a great sort of like, you know, great thing for kids to do as well, you know, help with their homework, and it's really good to get involved.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Donna. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you today.
Louise. Thank you.
See you again soon.
Okay, take care.